90 years of the black boy and 80 years of the beautiful wife. Once upon a time, in a small, sunny village, there was a black boy named Amos. Amos was no ordinary boy. He was kind and hardworking, always helping others and smiling brightly. But what made him special was something else. Amos never seemed to grow old. Years went by, and Amos stayed the same. His friends grew taller, their hair turned gray, but Amos remained the same young boy, full of energy and joy. People in the village often wondered, how does Amos stay so young? What is his secret? One day, while Amos was planting mango trees, he met a beautiful girl named Zara. Zara had the warmest smile, and her laugh sounded like the sweetest song. Like Amos, Zara was kind and loved helping others. The two became best friends, laughing, playing, and dreaming about adventures together. As the years passed, Zara grew older, her hair turning silver like moonlight. But Amos stayed the same young boy. Even though their appearances were different, their hearts were still the same, full of love for each other. They promised to stay together forever. Now, Amos was 90 years old, and Zara was 80, but Amos still looked like the same young boy from the day they met. People in the village whispered, what is their story? Why does Amos stay so young? And how does their love stay so strong? One evening, Zara and Amos sat under a big mango tree, looking at the stars. Zara asked, Amos, do you think the stars are listening to us? Amos smiled and said, maybe they are waiting for us to tell them a story, or maybe they hold secrets about us that we don't even know yet. Amos said, his eyes twinkling like the stars above. Zara leaned against him, her silver hair glowing softly in the moonlight. If they know our secrets, then I hope they're good ones, she said with a chuckle. Amos looked up at the stars again, lost in thought. Zara, do you ever wonder why I've stayed like this all these years? Zara smiled gently. I've wondered, Amos, but I stopped worrying about it a long time ago. It doesn't matter to me. What matters is you've stayed by my side, and that's all I've ever needed. Amos felt a warm glow in his chest. He reached for Zara's hand and held it tightly. You've always been the reason my heart feels full, Zara, but maybe it's time to find out why I'm like this. Maybe the stars do know something we don't. The next morning, Amos and Zara decided to visit the Wise One, an old woman who lived at the edge of the village. The Wise One was known for her knowledge of ancient stories and magical secrets. If anyone could tell them the truth, it was her. The journey to her hut was long and quiet. As they walked, Amos noticed how the trees seemed to lean toward them, as if they were whispering. Zara smiled as colorful birds flew past, singing cheerful tunes. It was as if the whole world knew they were about to uncover something important. When they finally arrived, the Wise One greeted them with a mysterious smile. Her hut was filled with jars of herbs, glowing crystals, and strange books. Amos, she said, her voice soft but powerful, I've been waiting for you. Amos and Zara exchanged surprised looks. You've been waiting? Amos asked. Do you know why I haven't grown old? The Wise One nodded slowly. Your story began long before you came to this village. It is tied to a choice you made long ago, a choice of love, sacrifice, and a gift you may not even remember. Sit down, and I will tell you what I know. Amos and Zara sat on the floor, their hearts beating with curiosity. The Wise One began, her voice like a song. A long time ago, when you were just a boy, something extraordinary happened to you. Something extraordinary happened to you. The Wise One continued, her gaze locking with Amos's. You met a traveler, didn't you? Someone who seemed different? Amos's eyes widened as a memory flickered in his mind. Yes, he whispered. I was playing by the river, and a strange man appeared. He was dressed in shining robes, and his voice was like thunder and rain at the same time. He told me I had a good heart. The Wise One nodded. That traveler was no ordinary man. He was a keeper of time, a guardian who watches over the balance of the world. He saw something special in you, Amos, your kindness, your love for others. And so, he gave you a gift. Do you remember what he said? Amos shook his head slowly. I only remember him touching my forehead and saying something about never losing my heart. The Wise One smiled faintly. That gift was immortality, not for greed or power, but as a reward for your pure heart. You were meant to remain young forever so you could spread kindness and help those in need. But there's more to this story. Amos, the keeper of time, warned you about something, didn't he? Amos furrowed his brow, struggling to remember. Zara reached for his hand, her warmth steadying him. Slowly, Amos began to recall. He said, He said the gift could last forever, but only if I found someone who could share my heart, someone whose love could balance my eternal youth. Zara gasped softly, her hand tightening around his. Amos, that's us. We've shared everything, our dreams, our joy, even our years together. The wise one nodded again. Yes, Zara, your love for each other is what keeps the gift alive. But there is something you must know. Her voice grew heavier, and the room seemed to darken. The balance is delicate. If the love you share ever falters, if doubt or fear enters your hearts, the gift could be lost. And Amos, you would finally begin to age. Amos and Zara looked at each other, their hearts filled with both wonder and worry. We've never doubted our love, Amos said firmly. But is there a way to make the bond stronger? To protect it forever? The wise one leaned closer, her eyes shimmering. There is a way. You must journey to the heart of the world, a sacred place hidden deep within the whispering forest. There, you will find the eternal flame, if your love is true. The flame will bind your hearts together forever, making your bond unbreakable. Zara's eyes sparkled with determination. We'll do it. We'll find the eternal flame, no matter how far or how hard the journey is. The wise one smiled. But be warned, she said. The path to the heart of the world is full of trials. It will test your love, your courage, and your trust in each other. Only those who truly believe in their bond can reach the flame. Amos stood, his hand still holding Zara's. We've spent 80 years proving our love. Wise one, we'll prove it again. With that, Amos and Zara left the wise one's hut, their hearts filled with determination. As they stepped back into the sunlight, the wind seemed to whisper, "The journey begins, the journey begins." Amos and Zara walked side by side, heading toward the whispering forest. The villagers watched as they left, some waving, others whispering among themselves about the bravery of the old couple and the boy who never aged. The forest loomed in the distance, its trees taller than any Amos and Zara had ever seen. The closer they got, the more the air seemed to change. It was cooler, quieter, and the wind carried strange sounds, like soft voices murmuring secrets. When they stepped under the canopy of trees, the world around them grew dim. Sunlight barely reached the ground, and everything seemed alive. The trees swayed gently even when there was no breeze, and the roots twisted and shifted as if they were watching. This place feels strange, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Amos nodded. The wise one said the forest would test us. Stay close to me, Zara. We'll face it together. They hadn't gone far when the first trial began. A thick fog rolled in, swirling around them until they could barely see each other. Amos reached out for Zara's hand but found nothing. Zara, he called, his voice echoing in the silence. I'm here. Zara's voice came from somewhere nearby, but when Amos turned toward the sound, he still couldn't see her. He took a step forward, and suddenly the fog seemed to grow thicker, colder. He couldn't tell which direction he was moving anymore. Amos, Zara's voice called again, this time sounding farther away. Panic began to creep into his chest, but he took a deep breath and steadied himself. I know you're close, Zara. I'll find you, he shouted. Zara, on the other side of the fog, was struggling too. She could hear Amos, but every time she tried to follow his voice, the path seemed to twist and turn. Amos, she cried, fear creeping into her voice. Then, as if the forest were alive, the fog began to whisper. Why do you trust him? The voices said to Zara, he is young and strong. You are old and frail. One day, he will leave you behind. Zara froze, her heart pounding. No, she said aloud, shaking her head. Amos would never leave me. He's stayed by my side all these years. He loves me. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Are you sure? What if he finds someone else, someone who matches his youth? You've seen how the villagers look at him. They wonder why he's with someone like you. Zara clenched her fists, tears stinging her eyes. Stop it, she shouted. I know his heart. I know his love. You can't make me doubt him. Meanwhile, the fog whispered to Amos as well. Why do you stay with her? It hissed. You could have anyone, but you chose an old woman. Why? Amos's jaw tightened, his fists clenching. I chose her because I love her, he said firmly. She will not be with you forever, the voices sneered. When she is gone, you will be alone. Why not leave her now and spare yourself the pain? I would rather have one day with Zara than a lifetime without her, Amos said, his voice steady. Nothing you say will change that. As soon as those words left his lips, the fog began to thin. Amos saw a faint outline of Zara in the distance and ran toward her. At the same time, Zara saw Amos's figure emerging through the mist. They reached each other and embraced tightly. "I thought I'd lost you," Zara whispered, tears in her eyes. "You'll never lose me," Amos said. "Not now, not ever." As they held each other, the fog disappeared completely, and the forest seemed to sigh in relief. The trees swayed gently, and a faint path appeared before them, glowing with soft light. "That was the first test," Zara said, her voice still shaky. Amos nodded. "And we passed. Let's keep going. No matter what the forest throws at us, we'll face it together." They took their first step onto the glowing path, hand in hand, not knowing what other challenges lay ahead. But they were ready to face them, their love burning brighter than ever. Their love burning brighter than ever. As they followed the glowing path deeper into the whispering forest, the trees grew taller, their branches twisting like arms reaching toward the sky. Strange sounds filled the air, soft rustles, distant whispers, and an occasional low hum that made the ground tremble beneath their feet. Amos tightened his grip on Zara's hand. "Stay close. This forest feels alive, and I don't think it's done testing us." Zara nodded. "We've come this far. Whatever it has planned, we'll face it together." After a while, the path led them to a wide, open clearing. In the center stood a crystal-clear lake that sparkled like 1,000 diamonds. The water was so still it looked like glass, and in its reflection, they could see the sky above, though no stars were visible. Just as they approached the lake, a deep, melodic voice echoed around them. "You have passed the test of doubt, but now you must face the test of truth." Amos and Zara looked around, but they couldn't see who was speaking. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "What truth?" Amos asked, his voice steady. "The truth of your hearts," the voice replied. "Step into the water, and it will reveal what you hide from each other. Only the brave can face what lies beneath the surface." Amos and Zara exchanged a glance. Amos could see the hesitation in Zara's eyes, and she could see the same in his. What if the water revealed something they weren't ready to face? Zara took a deep breath. "We've never hidden anything from each other," she said softly. "We've always been honest, haven't we?" Amos hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. "Yes, Zara, but if there's anything we've missed, we need to know. Let's face it together." Hand in hand, they stepped into the lake. The water was cool, but as they walked deeper, it warmed, wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. The surface rippled, and suddenly, the reflections in the water began to change. Amos looked down and saw himself as he was young, strong, unchanged by time. But beside him, Zara's reflection looked different. She wasn't old. She was young again, the way she had been when they first met. She was laughing, her hair dark and flowing, her smile bright and carefree. Amos's chest tightened. He hadn't seen that version of Zara in so many years, and for a moment, he felt a pang of sadness. Did she miss being young? Did she ever wish she could be like him, unchanging? Zara, meanwhile, was staring at the reflection of Amos. She saw not only the boy she had loved for so many decades, but something else, an expression of pain hidden behind his bright eyes. It was the pain of knowing he would outlive her, the quiet sorrow he carried every day but never spoke about. The lake whispered their thoughts aloud. "Amos, you fear losing her. You wonder if your gift is a curse, if it will leave you alone in the end." Amos's voice trembled. "It's true. I think about it every day, but I'd rather face that pain than live without her now. I chose her, and I'll keep choosing her, no matter what." The lake turned to Zara. "Zara, you fear you are not enough for him. You worry that one day he might regret staying with you, that he deserves someone who can stay by his side forever." Tears filled Zara's eyes. "I've always been afraid of that, but I know Amos's heart. He's stayed by my side for 80 years, and he's never given me a reason to doubt his love. I don't need forever, I just need him." As their truth spilled into the water, the lake began to glow. The reflections shimmered and disappeared, leaving only their true selves standing together, hand in hand. "You have passed the test of truth," the voice said, softer now. "Love that accepts the truth of the heart is stronger than any fear. The path to the eternal flame is now open." The lake parted, revealing a new path that led through the trees, its edges lined with golden light. Amos and Zara stepped out of the water, their hearts lighter than they had felt in years. "2 tests down," Amos said, smiling at Zara. "One more to go." Zara smiled back. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." They stepped onto the glowing path, their steps sure and steady as the forest seemed to hum with approval. Ahead, they could see the faint flicker of firelight, and they knew they were getting closer to the heart of the world. Amos and Zara continued along the glowing path, their hearts filled with hope. The flicker of the eternal flame grew brighter with each step, and the forest around them seemed to cheer them on, its whispers now soft and encouraging. Finally, they reached a grand clearing at the very center of the whispering forest. In the middle stood the eternal flame, a tall, golden fire that danced without smoke or heat. It burned brighter than the sun, yet its light was soothing, not blinding. The ground around it was covered in smooth, white stone, and the air felt alive with magic. As Amos and Zara stepped closer, the flame seemed to pulse. As if it recognized them, a voice rose from